What we want to do next is animate the propeller and then duplicate that entire animated propeller. So first we'll unshie all of these layers, then come up to the propeller to animate it. With the layer selected, we'll type R to reveal its rotation parameters. Now we want to rotate this around the Z axis. So down at the bottom, we'll click the stopwatch to set a keyframe for 0 degrees. We'll use end on the keyboard to jump to the end of our composition, then change the revolutions to 1. If we type 0 on the number pad, we'll get a quick RAM preview. And in our RAM preview, we'll see a little jump in the looping animation of our rotation parameter. That's because the first keyframe and the last keyframe are exactly the same. So while every single frame in this animation has a different value, the last frame in the animation is actually exactly the same as the first frame. We want to change this so that every frame in our animation has a separate value. A very easy way to do this is simply clicking and dragging on the last keyframe to move it one frame beyond the end of the composition. Now we can see that the value for the last frame in our composition is 356 degrees, not one full revolution. But when it comes back around in our looping animation, the propeller rotation will appear much more smoothly than it did before. We'll go back to the beginning of the composition, then simply select the layer and duplicate it using Ctrl-D or Command-D on the Mac. Then with the selection tool, click and drag on the red axis to move this over to the other side of our underwater lab. We'll close all of the layers up to see that we have several layers now making up our very simple underwater laboratory. And should we want to animate this entire piece as one unit, we can simply select all of the layers and then tie them to a null object. Let's do that first. So under Layers, we can select a new null object. Then using Ctrl-A or Command-A on a Mac to select all of the layers, and using the Control key or the Command key again to deselect the layers we don't want included in our parenting, we can parent the remaining selected layers all to this null. If we type R on the keyboard to reveal the rotation values, we can see that they're only two-dimensional. Remember, we can make nulls 3D by clicking on the switch in the column. Now, by rotating the submarine around its new null parent, I can see that one of the propellers is off a little bit. All we need to do is go down into the parameters for propeller 1, which is layer 4, then open up the position values for propeller 2, and change the Z value movement to a negative value from propeller 1. Now, there are a lot of layers that we need to keep track of when building our model, but once this model is built, we may want to package them all together into a pre-composite in order to animate it a little easier. We'll close up all of our layers, then we could select them and pre-composite them, or more easily, simply create a new composition called 01 Aqualab Underwater. We'll make the duration for this new composition match the duration of our current composition, which is only 3 seconds, and click OK. Once we create a new composition, we're brought back to the Unlocked tab, which is our 4-view setup. We'll change this back to a single view. Then we'll add our underwater lab, make it 3D, then add a new camera. We'll change it from custom view to our active camera now. With the aqua layer selected, we'll open up the rotation parameters by typing R on the keyboard. If we rotate this now, by rotating around the y-axis, we can see that it's like any other source material and that it's simply a flat layer. If we bring this around to 90 degrees on the y-axis, it's completely flat and only 1 pixel deep on the z-axis. However, if we turn our switches on for continuous rasterization, by clicking in the switches column, we can command After Effects to look inside our previous composition, then use all of those values to create the image we see in the current composition. Now by changing the rotation values here on this 3D pre-comp with continuous rasterization turned on, we can see all of the 3D transformations that are occurring inside that pre-comp. Now with access to the entire composition as one layer, it's much easier to animate, and we can do that by simply setting up some keyframes for the position parameter. We'll set a keyframe for the sub on the right-hand side of our screen. At frame 0, then at the end of our composition, we'll move the submarine down into the center. We'll also change an animation for our rotation, And at the beginning of our composition, we'll set keyframes for the Y rotation so that it's not directly facing camera. Then at the end of the composition, change the values so that it rotates as it floats down under the water. With a quick RAM preview, we can see that manipulating all of these 3D layers together is much easier inside this pre-comp than it is in a multi-layered composition.